More into refugees, David Cameron has warned of a critical shortfall in aid for its people. He was speaking at an international fundraising conference in London. So far, nearly £7 billion has been pledged by donor countries. Britain alone has offered an extra £1.2 billion over the next 4 years. That money will fund jobs and education, part of the government's strategy to help refugees to stay in the region. But past pledges of cash have not always been honoured by some countries, as our diplomatic correspondent Bridget Kendall reports.
أي مأساة السوريين لاجئين.
In Jordan, stretching into the distance. Across the region, Syrian refugees may soon number over 4.5 million, with 13.5 million more displaced inside the country. A tide of desperate humanity. So today in London, there was a feeling this pledging conference must do more to help. Syria's neighbours say they're near breaking point.
Soon, Lebanon will no longer be able to contain an eruption that could involve further migration to distant shores, destabilization, and devolved security threats.
Looking into the eyes of my people and seeing the hardship and distress they carry, I must tell you, we have reached our limit.
Last year, the world only gave the United Nations half the aid it needed. So in the end, food rations to refugees had to be cut. One reason so many decided to move on to Europe. Which means today in London, there's new self-interest. Give aid to ease conditions in the region and maybe stem the flow coming towards Europe. But will it work? There have been previous donor conferences. Isn't there a danger the same thing is happening this time round and all your impressive pledges will ring rather hollow?
It will make a difference in terms of saving lives, in terms of providing medicine, in terms of providing shelter and food. And these are important because we're fulfilling our moral responsibility.
فقط 18 سوري كانوا يتظاهرون خارج هذا المؤتمر اليوم.
Of course, announcing all these big pledges of aid here in London is one thing. Actually delivering it on the ground is quite
كان في 300 من مجاهدي خلق و300 من جماعة أوجلان الأكراد. وفقط 15 إلى 18 سوري.
The omens are not looking good. On the ground, the bombardments from Russian airstrikes backing Syrian government troops have just got heavier.
كان يجب يكون في 300 سوري يتكلم عن موضوع سوريا خارج القاعة خارج المؤتمر.
The fledgling peace talks in Geneva when they'd hardly begun, and that's even before the outside world works out how to unite against the so-called IS jihadists in the east. World leaders this morning said it was time to act, not talk. But whatever's achieved here in London, it seems unlikely it'll bring this conflict any nearer to a close. Bridget Kendall, BBC News, London.
Well, as we've heard, Turkey, Jordan and Lebanon desperately need long-term support to cope with the huge influx from Syria. Over 4 million refugees are now living in the region. 1 million of them are in neighbouring Lebanon, many in refugee camps. Our correspondent Clive Myrie is in one of them. Clive, plenty of words here. What are the facts on the ground?
Yeah, George, a lot of money has been pledged, but where is it needed most? There's no question the vast majority of the refugees here would like to work to provide for their families, and some of the donor money will go towards opening the labour market here and creating jobs. But many of the refugees are, of course, children, and funding is sorely needed for their education. They've had a rough ride in life, these children. Syrian victims of a war they're too young to understand. In this refugee camp in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, they're being given back their childhoods, a few hours at a time. Meet Mohammed, who's 13, and brother Mustafa, a year older. They attend school 5 days a week, like the 270 other youngsters at the camp. But when school's out, they and some of the other kids receive a lesson in life. They work in the brick factory that borders their home to pay around 40 pence a day. It's dusty and
14 قرش في اليوم
but necessary work for this.
ليأخذ هذا الطفل.
Every penny is precious.
يحمل الطوب وينقله. 14 قرش من الباوند في اليوم يأخذ أجرته.
Then they recalled the day they fled their home in Aleppo in Syria. Around sunset, when it started getting dark, they started firing, he says, and we ran away. The next day we came here to Lebanon. We only took our clothes. As they toiled and heaved bricks, in London, delegates at the Conference for Syria raised more money to pay for the education of refugee children and to create well-paying job opportunities for their parents. Over lunch, Mustafa and Mohammed admit life is hard now. Lunch over.
هدول بيساعدوا أبوهم اللي معهم سرطان عشان يحكموه لأبوهم. 3 أولاد.
Young men are mature beyond their years. Like so many of the other child refugees, they've had to grow up fast. The boys told me they wanted to go home, to return to Syria. But what are the prospects of that in the near future? Frankly, they're incredibly slim. Those nascent peace talks have been suspended. The so-called Islamic State group still holds large swathes of land, and the Syrian government forces have been making gains in recent days, particularly around the city of Aleppo. Pledges of funds from the London conference will help make lives of those in exile a lot better, it's hoped. But when will they return home? Not for some considerable time. George, back to you.
Clive, thank you very much. Thank you. A UN panel of experts has decided that the WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange, is